Hi everyone, I'm Marisa Zeppieri Caruana, and today I'm going to actually talk to you about one of my favorite things, which is journaling, and for two very specific reasons. One, to help you with your mindset, and two, to actually help you have a little bit more control over your flares, no matter what chronic illness or autoimmune disease you have. So I want to jump right in, but before we go into the worksheet and the actual topic, I want to give you a little bit of background on me. I myself have had lupus now for 20 years, although I was probably sick more around 8 or 9 years old, but unfortunately I wasn't diagnosed until my 20s. I had a major trigger that I can link my symptoms to in my 20s, which is why they came out so severe. So it's something that I actually talk to people about when I discuss journaling, because for most of you, you probably realize that there are certain triggers that seem to make your symptoms worse. And if you're newly diagnosed, this is a great time to just sort of dig in and get everything sort of squared away and know that there will most likely be certain things in your life, and we'll go through them, that could make your symptoms get worse. So this is where journaling plays a crucial role. Now you'll see I added a worksheet, and I'm also going to put in a few slides here and there just because I'm very visual and I like to explain things in a graphic sort of sense. So hopefully you learn that way maybe. And if not, you have the worksheet if you actually like to take part. So let's get into journaling for not only to help you have a better mindset, but also learn more about your patterns, your triggers, and to help you actually prevent some symptoms and flare-ups from coming on. We're going to actually dig into that first. So grab your worksheet and let's go. Journaling has been such a crucial part of my life, and it has helped me learn so much about myself and how lupus affects me over the past 20 years. Now, for some of you that don't love to write, it might seem like, oh, it's just like another thing I have to do. But journaling can be extremely simple, depending on how much information you want to put into it. But it can also be very beneficial, even if you just do a little bit every single day. Now, I originally started with a loose leaf like binder, and then I moved on to a yearly planner calendar, a fairly large one, so that I had enough room to really write, and definitely one that had extra space for notes and whatnot. So I'm going to give you in a little while a snapshot of a day of what I would journal. And there's a lot of reasons behind this of why I got into this practice. So when I was first diagnosed, I was completely overwhelmed. I had multiple things going on. I had lupus, I had urticaria, I had allergies, I had asthma, I had vasculitis. So I wasn't really sure where the symptoms were coming from and really just how to take control over anything. I felt like my body was just sort of betraying me, to be honest with you, and I didn't know what to do. I was equally frustrated at just not only the diagnosis, but not being able to control things the way I wanted to, because I'd originally gone to school to be a nurse, so I felt like I should have better control over all of this, but I really didn't. And then someone said, you know what, you should really journal. And we had a discussion, and I sort of just went with it, and I went into this whole other level with it because I love to write. So this is what I did. Every single day, I wrote how much I slept the night before, every single thing that I was eating or drinking, even if it was just water, even if it was something as simple as one cracker. I wrote what medications I was on and the strength, when I took them, if the doctors had put me on a new medication. I also wrote every day what symptoms I felt throughout the day, and if I napped and for how long. Also, depending on your chronic illness, there might be other things that you want to add in there. So for lupus, for example, a lot of us are triggered by the sun or the heat or UV lighting, which is for me one of my main triggers. So I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. Any single time I went outside, I wrote how long I was in the sun for, because later I found through my journal that there was a direct correlation. I didn't know that at first. So also, was I doing any exercise? Was there any stress in my life? This was a big one. There's good stress and there's bad stress, but either way, you need to write it down. If I was having, let's say, a negative stress reaction and I was crying, I started to write these things down. If there was something going on in your life, you want to put this in your journal. It could be something great too. Maybe you're buying a new house. Maybe you're moving. Maybe you're getting married. These are things that are exciting, but they're also very stressful to the body. So here's the thing. I start writing these things down every single day. And yes, they took time. Some days I missed, but for the most part, I'd say 80 or 90% of the time, I got it all down. And then over time, I started to see these direct patterns. For me, and yours will absolutely be different, but I knew that when I went in the sun for more than 15 minutes, I would get fevers, rashes, nose and mouth sores. And if I was in the sun for a really long time, sometimes I'd actually wind up in the hospital or in a massive flare-up that sometimes would last 1 week to several weeks. So I learned through patterns and through my journaling that sunlight for me was a major issue. So much so that I actually left Florida and moved near the Canadian border. Now here's another one, especially for women here in the Autoimmune Strategy Summit. A lot of autoimmune diseases and chronic illness symptoms tend to increase right before your menstrual cycle. They can also increase if you're having premenopause, which is something that I'm also familiar with. So your hormones are fluctuating up and down, and there is a hormonal link with a lot of autoimmune diseases. So you might notice the week before your menstrual cycle, you are absolutely exhausted. Maybe you have more fevers. Like it's, we already deal with fatigue, but this might be a fatigue that's absolutely crushing, and you feel like those few days before, you literally cannot get out of bed and you can't get anything done. I only began to see that correlation because I was journaling. Also, I would just put literally a little dot on my calendar to let me know when I was having my menstrual cycle. And over time, I knew those 3 or 4 days before that was about to happen, I could literally schedule nothing. I couldn't have doctor's appointments. I would work from home if I was working at the time, and I would limit any family or friend activities because that was a difficult time every month for me, on top of, right, we're already dealing with so much. So if you honestly give this a couple of months to a year, I guarantee you are going to see so many trends and patterns, and you're going to be able to figure out for you what are some things that trigger you. It could be something as simple as crying. I know that sounds strange. When I cry, especially if I cry heavily and multiple times in a day, for instance, when my father passed away 2 years ago, I had a massive flare-up after. Within 24 hours, I was having fevers, rashes, severe pain, crushing fatigue, and I've noticed this pattern in my life. Same thing when my grandmother passed away. So for you, it might be something completely different. I also want to mention the foods that we eat. Everyone is different. I know we hear a lot online about autoimmune diets and diets for anti-inflammatory. And I think that there's pieces of those things that are crucial and that are amazing. For me, diet and functional medicine has been a huge part of my life and in helping me deal with a lot of symptoms. But where I needed to start with before just randomly following a diet was working with an allergist and being tested. So a lot of autoimmune diseases are linked to a high percentage of allergies. So it's a really good idea to know what food sensitivities you have or food allergies, because for me, I loved avocados and I was eating between 1 and 2 a day. It also came up the highest on my allergy list. So here I am thinking, technically I'm eating something healthy, but I'm having severe stomach reactions from something that I was eating and I couldn't figure it out. So again, list the foods that you're eating, list all of the drinks that you're drinking. I met someone not too long ago she had no idea she was allergic to coffee. I didn't even know that this was a thing, but she was getting really sick every day and she didn't know why. And she wound up discovering it through journaling. Then she went and had a test, and sure enough, it was caffeine. She can't metabolize caffeine properly. So this is where journaling comes in as far as helping you to lower your symptoms in some way, or at least somehow prevent severe symptoms or prevent certain flare-ups. Once I learned that I can prevent some of my flare-ups by just going out later in the day or staying out of direct sunlight, I've been able to decrease a lot of symptoms and just being sick much more often. So just please give it a try. We have a worksheet here. So I just want you to take a minute, if you can, and just go through it. Take a look at the food area, look at the sleep area, and think about, what have you eaten so far today? How much did you sleep last night? Or have you done any exercise? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, because a lot of us, I understand, when we're in a flare or if we're newly diagnosed, we're not exercising. So when I say exercise, maybe you did a 5-minute stretch in your bed. Maybe you did 10 minutes of yoga, or maybe you just did a mindfulness meditation practice. Write it in there. So use this form that I made. So you'll see in my journal example that I go into my sleep heavily. Sleep is a big one for me. If I don't sleep well for a couple of days, I typically have more severe symptoms. And I can even go into a flare-up. So you're going to see my sleep, you're going to see my napping. You're going to see a lot of food. You're going to see my medications, if I had a doctor's appointment, if there was any stress, if I did any physical activity. So it is a lot. But even if you just start off with just your food or just your sleep, and then every couple of days, start adding more and more. Give yourself some time. And then go back, never throw out your journals. That's one thing I want to add. Go back and start looking at patterns and trends. If you were in the sun one day for 15 minutes and then the next 4 days in your journal you wrote, had an increase in fevers, had mouth and nose sores, had a rash breakout, and you consistently see something like this happening, you can always go back later and link it to the sunlight. Okay, now here's the second part about journaling that for me was really exciting. I call this celebrating your small wins, and it is crucial when you have a chronic illness, because let's face it, so much of chronic illness is challenging and frustrating and can be very negative. And sometimes we can just sit with that, and it can really wreak havoc on our emotional state, on our mental state, on our mental health. It is like, I understand, I deal with this too every single day. But one day this light bulb sort of just went off. I'll never forget. When I was moving from Fort Lauderdale up to upstate New York, and I found some of my old journals, again, I never get rid of them, and I was going through one, and it was in this time that I was in this flare-up, and I wound up in a wheelchair for a year. I'd had a couple of small strokes, and I had this physical therapist that would come to the house 3 days a week to help me because I had a lot of muscle wasting. So in my journal entry, I saw that my goal for the day with the physical therapist was to walk without my wheelchair, with the walker, unassisted for a minute. And I just started crying. Yes, I did start crying when I read this, even though I know crying for me brings on symptoms, because it brought me back to that very minute. And I thought to myself, I remember how hard it was to go from the wheelchair to the walker, and how I dreaded every time this woman would come over, because my whole body would shake and it was exhausting. I would be in bed for the rest of the day. But here's what it did. It showed me how far I had come in just maybe it was a 2-year difference. That at that point, when I found the journal, I had actually recently joined a gym so that I could start swimming again, which was something that I always loved to do. But when I was in that point where I could only walk for a minute unassisted, if you told me that I would be swimming again years later, I would have thought you were, I wouldn't have believed you. Let's just put it that way. And it was an opportunity for me to realize I have come so far. I've done so much. But when we're in it every day, sometimes it's really difficult for us to see our small wins. So have a little box, have a little area of things that you've achieved. They could be something as simple as, it was a horrible flare day, but I was able to take a shower, or I was able to sit with my son for 45 minutes and read a book, or I was able to, have a little bit of like a date night, intimacy night with my partner. I was able to run some errands. Maybe I was able to take only 2 naps today instead of 3. I was able to get some laundry done. I was able to write a book. I was able to start working part-time. We all have these different things, and it doesn't matter if they're these great achievements and massive achievements, because honestly, anything for me with chronic illness is an achievement, because this is difficult every single day and we struggle. So write these things down, and I promise you, when you go back after a year and you look at these things and you say to yourself, I did so much. Like, and maybe for a healthy peer, even taking a shower, like they don't understand how much that means on a day that you're having a flare up and you're so sick. Or for me, I'll tell you guys something very personal, but like I went gray in my 20s. So, gray on black hair is very noticeable. And for me, I come from a family of hairdressers. I like to have my hair like colored, but it sometimes takes all of my energy, right? It's a long process. So for me, it's like I kind of set aside a day for that. It's something really simple. And, maybe the men won't understand it, or people that are healthy, like that's just something so simple for them. But for me, it actually makes me feel like so much better. Anything that makes us feel better about ourselves, like write it down. So that's just one thing to help with your mental health and your mindset. So in your daily calendar, just make sure, at least if you can't do it daily, at least do it weekly. Write a couple of things about yourself. It may seem sort of awkward at first, but trust me, celebrating our small wins is crucial with chronic illness. We need to remind ourselves, especially as we live with these illnesses for years, just how much we have overcome and how resilient we are. So here's the last thing that I want to discuss when it comes to journaling and now your mindset. So I have sort of like two different notebooks. I have my yearly calendar, which is where I write my everyday things that we just discussed. And then I actually have an area on my computer, and I have like a leather bound binder where I can actually like just hand write things that I'm thinking about, or any anxieties, or just things that have happened during the day where I need more space, right? You don't need to do this every single day, but I would really just want to drive home to at least try this a few times a week. It can literally be just 10 minutes. And here's the thing about having this safe space to write down your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your anxieties, things that are going on in your life. There's no judgment on that paper. You can put it all down. You can talk about the emotional, scary, messy things that maybe you do not feel comfortable discussing with anyone else. What I would suggest to you, though, is don't edit yourself. Don't feel like you have to write things in a certain way because you're judging yourself. Like, I'm having these thoughts, I don't even know if I want to write them down. Just let it be a time of just freedom, because this can be such a freeing activity for you. And here's the thing, when you're journaling and you look back after 10 minutes, you can, whether it's 10 minutes or whether it's a couple of days later, a lot of us will find that a lot of the things that we're worried about and we're fearful about in life don't actually happen. But getting it out and not internalizing it is so important for those of us that deal with chronic illness and autoimmune disease. Because the way that we think and how we internalize things absolutely has an effect on how we feel physically. So when you journal, I would tell you at the end to take some action steps, because something that you journal, it might be a very heavy topic. You might have had a really rough day. So I don't want to say it's a lot of negativity coming out on the paper, but it's just heavy things, right? That can just feel like they're weighing you down. You might feel really sad. So what I try to do is at least list 1 to 2 things that I am grateful for. And sometimes it might be as simple as, I'm just grateful that I woke up this morning, because maybe the rest of my day in my eyes was extremely difficult or very frustrating, or I am just so grateful that, for me, my mom is like my best friend. She lives with me. I take care of her. I'm so grateful that she's still here and that I still have time with her. It can be little things like that, or I'm grateful that I was able to, meet a new doctor who was amazing, and we're going to try like a new treatment protocol. Or I'm grateful that this new supplement I'm taking is helping me with some of my symptoms. I'm grateful that I was able to take my dog for a 10-minute walk instead of a 5-minute walk, and I felt good afterwards. Like, it could be something just simple like that, but always leave with some action steps. 1 to 2 things that you're grateful of. And also, sometimes you can do this in 1 sentence, but how do you want to move forward? Like, set an intention for the rest of the day or for your next day. Maybe it's something you want to do differently. Maybe it's, just a way that you want to speak to yourself. That's another thing. We can really see over time in our journals just how we speak to ourselves. And that, to me, is one of the most important things in life. We would never, want to speak to someone else in a terrible way and make them feel like less than or worthless, or just less than because maybe they have, a chronic illness or they have some type of limitation. But a lot of times in the fact that, we have fears and anxiety and we're not feeling well, we're so hard on ourselves. Like, we put so much extra pressure on ourselves, and I get it, and I understand why, because when you do have a limitation or you do have a chronic illness or you're in a flare-up and you're like barely keeping it together, and you see all these people, especially with the, non-reality of social media, that they look like they have it all together, and we work so hard to keep up. And it is so draining to our physical body, and it is so draining to our mental health. So we need to be really careful how we speak to ourselves and how we speak about ourselves. So just keep all of those things in mind. I would suggest then, if you can, have 2 separate journals, so to speak. These could literally be a notebook from your dollar store. They could be that, just $2, right? Get one for your daily symptoms and the things that are going on, and get one where you can just be free to write. If you do not like actually writing by hand, I'd say set up a folder somewhere on your computer, a Google Drive file where you can just have like a Word document in there where you can just write, maybe you're just happier typing. Maybe you want to just do voice. Some of us, when we're really sick, we don't even have the energy to write, but maybe you can just speak it out. Getting it out can be so helpful for your physical and your mental health. So those are some of my tips and just my advice on journaling. Writing has been obviously a huge part of my life and a huge part of my story. If you want, you can come check out my new memoir on chronic illness. It's called Chronically Fabulous. And guess what? I have chapters in there about journaling. So I just want to thank all of you so much for spending some time with me and letting me share just the whole experiences I've had over the past 20 years with journaling. I hope that you'll give it a try. If you do start to see some trends or triggers, or if you do begin to see just how your mindset changes, or how you start to think of things differently, or just how you start to speak to yourself differently, I'd love for you to drop me a note. I'd love to hear from you anyway. Reach out if you have any questions. And I wish all of you just an absolutely beautiful week. Take care.